She has a bachelor's degree from Seattle Pacific University in Eastern European Studies.
Yeah, no. I pursued a very different career.
Excellent. Katie Hensel is also with us, recruiting manager at HireStrategy. She has been with HireStrategy for a number of years, going back to September of 2014. Previously involved in social media and other recruiting activities with organizations like Monster, Clearance Jobs, and Dice. She is ready to partner with you in your job search. So with all of that, let Katie and Emily take it away.
Awesome. Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
So as Ken mentioned, we're visiting from HireStrategy, which is actually right down the street from here.
So first off, we're just going to give a quick overview of just HireStrategy, who we are, what we do. So we are a full-service professional staffing firm. Our headquarters are in Reston, Virginia. Katie and I work out of the DC office right on 14th and L, so about a 7-minute walk from here. We were founded in 2000, so we've been around for it'll be 18 years in the beginning of the year. And we have a national reach through Addison Group Partners, who is our parent company. So they're headquartered out in Chicago. So we've got 21 offices across the U.S. That said, HireStrategy has 3 offices. So Reston, D.C., and we also have an office in the Maryland location as well. Obviously, we have a super diverse client base because we've been around for so long, and we represent a variety of industries, including technology, media, financial services, healthcare, education, federal services, nonprofit organizations, and professional services as well. So we provide a variety of staffing and search services, but what we primarily focus on is the contract to hire, direct hire, and executive search. Retained, I will say that we don't do a ton of executive search, but if they fall within our specific matrix, depending on the group, then we'll work on some higher level positions. But we are not an executive search firm, so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And our recruiters, so they specialize in providing candidates with truly consultative, very focused and personalized career management advice, and we have these different divisions. So within the technology realm, we staff help desk, desk support, systems engineering, software engineering, QA, finance and accounting, APAR, staff accountant, financial analyst, procurement, tax, FP&A. We also have a sales and marketing division, which is actually joined with our HR admin team. It's not as large of a team, but we'll do some account executive searches, marketing managers, SEO, brand, digital media strategy types of positions. And then the HR administrative team is the team that Katie and I are on. And under that umbrella, we'll work on anything from an admin assistant to executive assistants, office managers, receptionists, anything from a very entry-level position to a pretty senior level role. Within the HR realm, it can be anything from an HR assistant to recruiting to generalist roles to high-level business partners and more strategic level positions as well. The HR admin division, we also, sorry to skip around, but we also have a non-clinical healthcare team that is one of our startup teams in DC. So within that, we do billing, insurance verifiers, credentialists, medical billing specialists, medical coding positions as well. And the HR administrative team that we sit on is actually the only team at HireStrategy that does contract to hire, and direct hire. The other teams up here are divided into both direct hire and contract teams because they're a little bit larger, and the HR administrative realm can be very fluid, and positions can be, titles can be extremely ambiguous when it comes to what you're actually doing. So yeah, that's kind of the overview.
And we'll talk a little bit later about why to partner with a staffing firm like us at the end. So a lot of the content that Emily and I are going to talk about was actually a study that was conducted by Edelman that our parent company called the Addison Group partnered with. So that's what all of this is being backed up by, and we'll give a caveat. Emily and I are not an expert by any means on this survey because we didn't conduct it ourselves, but we thought it was really interesting, really specific to the DC market. So there's an overall workplace survey that we'll talk to a bit that really is an overview of this study that was done on a national scale. All the data, though, that we're going to focus on is really specific within the DC metro area to just really understand what's important to employees in DC. So it was conducted here. The participants were anyone 18 years and older. It was about a 20-minute survey conducted this past summer within just general DC employees, healthcare employees, tech, and nonprofit. So there were 3 main takeaways from the survey. Emily and I are only going to focus on 1 and 3. This is so much information in here, so we want to break it down to what we felt like might be most relevant to everyone in the room. So the first one we'll focus on is purpose, people, and personal life have the strongest impact on DC employees and their workplace attitudes. So we're going to focus specifically on what employees look for in their workplace, as well as what they really value as far as trust in the workplace. And then lastly, we'll talk about, despite similarities across different sectors and industries, industry, gender, and location reveal the complexities of the DC metro market. So this is good news. Across DC, 82% of DC metro employees are satisfied at work. And they measure this off of 4 factors. So the industry that you work in, so large scale of private versus public or legal versus consulting. Second, the actual work that you're doing, what your role is on a day-to-day, what are your responsibilities. Third, your work-life balance. And then 4th, your career path. And what Emily and I really wanted to focus on this slide is figuring out in your search of really ranking for you what these 4 factors, what's important to you. The industry, the work you're doing, work-life balance, career path, and really defining that for yourself. That's something that as career consultants, when we're meeting with our candidates, we're going through every day of really understanding, ranking your job search of what's most important. So one to really point out is work-life balance. We hear that a lot of, I want good work-life balance. Well, define that for you and for a recruiter or someone that you might be partnering your search on. So figuring, is that maybe having flexibility to take care of family needs, or is it having more part-time hours, or having remote work, or thinking about location, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, especially in the DC area, of commuting and your hours, but really defining that for yourselves of what does work-life balance mean to you, because it's not the same for everyone. And for career path is really seeing where is this role taking you and how is that company going to take you there. Are you using this next role as a true stepping stone to maybe get into a different industry or maybe get into a different role? Then you maybe have to look at, let's make a similar transition into a similar industry that you've been, but maybe a different role, or maybe a different role, but a different industry. So just really ranking these for yourself.
Yeah, and understanding too that as you transition from one career to another or one organization to another, these criteria may change and shift, and something that was extremely important to you a couple of years ago can completely be, maybe something that isn't as important to you now. So just really, to reiterate something that she said, is just really focusing on what is most important to you, how do you rank these, and really starting your search off understanding what is most important to you and kind of making sure that you have these qualifying things in here.
And unfortunately, being realistic that you're probably not going to get all of these at that next role. So really making sure what's your walk away? What if this role doesn't have X, you're not going to take it, and figuring out what that is for you.
Yeah, and something to note as well, the unemployment rate in DC is extremely low right now, so it's not realistic to go into your job search, with 10 things you really want checked off, and just being mindful of the fact that you may only get 7 or 8 of those things checked. But understanding that in this market, when it is extremely competitive, it is very tight, there are things that you're going to have to potentially compromise on. So again, keeping that in mind. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, so when it comes to trust, DC employees emphasize purpose and ethics significantly more than benefits and salary. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that the 2017 workplace survey, that was nationwide. So nationwide, what was most important to employees was benefits and salary compensation. When you compare that to DC Metro employees, you'll find that what is most important is the work that they do and the company and organization's ethical standards. So of these 7 kind of trust variables, we found it extremely interesting to see how different the two were for DC versus nationwide. And this is definitely very relevant to what we see in the market every day. While salary is definitely very important to a lot of the candidates that we work with, we see that a lot of candidates, that are either in DC or coming specifically to DC for their job search, they are more concerned about the company and the mission that they're supporting and how their work is going to further that mission. So we really see this is definitely very relevant with us. And then the other several factors are obviously colleagues and the coworkers that you work with. This is specific to DC, and then the manager and your direct supervisor. And then transparent communication is the lowest there, which I think is interesting to see that transparent communication is kind of at the bottom, both in the workplace survey and for specific to DC Metro employees.
And one thing a slide that we didn't include, this survey that they conducted for us was about 60 slides. So again, we picked the ones that we felt were most relevant. But one thing that was interesting that was a little kudos to DC is no matter what your position was within the company, so whether you were a C-level executive down to the entry-level staff, employees in DC had a higher level of trust with their employee than on a national average. And these were the factors that contributed to that trust. So I think these are other, factors to think about in a job search, just like we talked about before, of industry and what your actual role is, and work-life balance. These are other things to take into consideration of what the company's ethics are and the actual work that they're doing, and the team that you're meeting. When you just have that good gut feeling about who you'd be working with, those are a lot of reasons why people trust the company that they work for.
And then rolling into that. So overall, you'll see, so there are 12 topics that were discussed here. And you'll see overall that DC employees feel the 3 biggest trust factors are the organization and the ethical standards, if it helps the greater good, and well respected. So I think it's just interesting to see how those are the ones that are most important to DC employees. And then we also have, if the company is highly competitive, consistently attracts young talent, organizations offer great benefits, consistently attracts higher skilled workers, networking is essential, people want to work in my industry, is up and coming. To be successful, you have to start from the bottom. It is beneficial to work in the city, and then pays high salaries was the lowest.
And these are other just lenses, I think, to look at when you are searching. These are other factors, aside from the big industry and the role, but really looking when you're doing your research on companies that you're excited about, answering some of these. And do people want to be in this industry? Is it something that is going to be around for a little while? Does the organization offer great benefits? And that might be some of those work-life balance questions that we talked about earlier. So.
Exactly, and depending on where you are in your search, these can completely change depending on where you are and what's most important to you, but just overall in DC, again, employees feel that the industries are ethical, respected, and helping the greater good, which we definitely see that.
We can get behind that. So to go to that third point of the takeaways of their survey, talking about just kind of the differences within the DC market, these are a couple of slides that we took from who's most satisfied at work. So kind of at large, males and boomers are most satisfied at work. Not to say that women and millennials aren't, but just in comparison to the other sections, males and boomers win in the.
You're right around 80 and above, which I think is a pretty good percentage. Yeah.
So this is the same slide that we showed earlier, but this breaks it down between men and women. So really across all of those factors, men and women feel pretty similar about most things in their industry. The two things though that they differ on, which we thought was really interesting, was networking and then pays high salaries. And maybe me and Em are a little bit have a weird lens on it just because we do a ton of networking and we're women, so we love networking.
I was surprised to see that
in DC, but that was really one huge area that was a discrepancy of males felt 20% more likely to agree that networking was essential. And then the second one is pays high salaries, that an industry that they were interested in. Males are 27% more likely to agree.
So this was interesting for us to see as well. So the vast majority of DC Metro employees do not commute outside the area they live in to get to work, which I just found so interesting. So as you can see, 90% of people who live in DC commute to a job in DC versus 88% Virginia and 80% in Maryland. Does anyone have any ideas of, maybe what is a contributing factor to this or the reasoning behind these percentages, just out of curiosity?
Metro and the bridge.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to cross either bridge, Wilson Bridge, Capitol.
Yeah.
And Metro is wonderfully unreliable.
Yeah.
I know in my own search, I live in DC. In my own search, I want to go back to walking to work.
Yeah.
So that's a priority.
Well, commuting within an area in DC is within like a 10-mile radius. If you commute in Virginia, you could be like 50 miles away and still be within the area of Virginia or more.
Yeah.
So those stats don't really mean a whole lot to me if I look at commuter traffic.
Let's do a quick poll in the room. How many of you are open to working in an area different from where you live? So if you're in Virginia, are you open to DC, you're in Maryland, so you're flexible. So this group's a little different.
We'll get, actually this next slide shows that exactly. So this past slide just was looking at people who live in DC, they also work in DC. And this, what we just took a little survey of in this room is the willingness to work in these following areas. DC, and that last was while it's the most attractive place to work, DC employees are willing to go to Maryland or Virginia for the right role.
In Virginia, it's interesting to see that less than half are willing to commute to Maryland. And like you said, Virginia versus Maryland, depending on where you are, it can be so tricky to get there. So
this is a huge, I think when we're meeting with candidates, especially in this area, this is a huge one that we have everyone rank their top 3 must-haves in their search, and location I think is one that oftentimes comes up, especially for people who live in DC and, to Ken's point, want to walk to work, and that you can't walk across the river. So, really ranking that for yourself if that is another thing that's important, and that might go into work-life balance of having obligations after work to be able to get home too.
Yeah, a huge question that one of our biggest questions is, do you have a car? Like, if you don't have a car and you're only off the metro, that really is going to potentially limit you to where you can work and what your commuting tolerance is. Everyone's patience level is different. I know mine is pretty much non-existent, so some people don't mind sitting, on the train or in traffic for an hour. That's not something that I would enjoy myself, but there are a lot of different factors that go into that.
So we wanted to circle back of when we're looking out for everyone in this room who might be job searching, really what are the benefits of, or why partner with a staffing firm? And it sounded like in 40 Plus there's so many opportunities just here with trainings and networking and community and all that good stuff, but where I think staffing firms can really come into play overall, it's just having that career coaching and career counseling really throughout the entire process. So anyone that we're partnering with, we're looking at their resume and really giving constructive feedback of what it should look like. Looking at your LinkedIn profile, making sure that lines up and matches. Having that kind of second set of eyes and ears on you in the market, but on your actual personal profile and personal branding that we share with you. And then throughout that process with a client, we are offering interview prep. So before you go into any interview with any of our clients, we're really walking through what questions to expect, how long will you be there, different things that we've had from other candidates that might have interviewed with that client. And then always debriefing afterwards. I think so many people go to interviews and you have to be honest with yourself when you walk out. What was your gut feeling? You might go to an interview and say, I don't want that job, and that's okay. But being kind of having that gut feeling and being able to chat with someone else about it, to walk through maybe some of your hesitations. And then lastly, just navigating that offer and the acceptance steps and negotiations throughout the process.
Yeah, and also to piggyback off of that, as we really try to be true consultants to our candidates, but we also do the same with the clients. So for instance, for me, as a business development manager, my job is to really understand not only that client's needs in terms of their hiring and who they're looking for, but also their environment, their culture, the managers, their management style, the type of personality that's going to work best with them, because we understand that there's so much more to our candidates than what's on a piece of paper or their LinkedIn profile, and same thing goes for the clients that we support. There's so much more to them than what you see online or what you read in a mission statement or the job posting that you read. So we really try to kind of play matchmaker in that regard. I partner with her, and we really kind of sit down and say, okay, this is what the client's needs are. Who can we find that's going to be the best match, not just on paper, but for all of these different reasons. And as this PowerPoint demonstrated, there are so many factors and variables that are involved in really connecting those dots as best as we can, that we truly try to be consultants on both the candidate and the client side. That way, when we also are prepping you and sharing information with you, you have kind of the insider scoop, and you can really be set up for success when you are going into these interviews.
And another great reason, I know someone in the back had a negative experience with contract assignments this morning, but it's a great way to bridge any major employment gaps on your resume, to work on short-term contract assignments. And that we see a lot of people who maybe relocate to the area or in a career transition of looking to maybe get into an industry that they've never been in before, that the likelihood of a company, unless you maybe network and find someone who works there, of really hiring you on full-time salaried is really less likely than to start something on just a contract basis, to just get your foot in the door in that company. And that's where those positions a lot of times aren't necessarily advertised on companies' websites. You have to kind of go through a third party like a staffing firm to really find those, because those are roles that they need filled pretty immediately, is why they come to us.
And also to piggyback off of that as well, our clients really work with us for the most part exclusively, especially once we've been around for almost 18 years. So we've got long-standing relationships with a lot of organizations who will come to us first prior to posting a job online. And so it's a really, really great way for our candidates to kind of get insider information as far as like what's going on in the market, who's hiring, what are the struggles that we're seeing, and how does that translate to the candidates in their job searches. So
yeah. And we wanted to leave a lot of time during this presentation. Again, Emily and I are not experts when it came to that Edelman survey, although we thought a lot of those statistics were really interesting. We wanted to leave a lot of time of what Emily and I do every day, of resume review and interview preps, and just serving as a consultative kind of resource. So wanted to open up for any questions that anyone might have.
So I'll take the post-prerogative and ask you a question. So give us a sense of what is your view of the market today? Specifically, where do you see the spots where there are the greatest needs, or industries or sectors that are most active today? As I said earlier, most of our folks here, including myself, are actively in the market. What do you see as the types of organizations or types of roles that are most in demand based on the groups you work with?
Gosh, see, that's a tough question to answer, because it really depends on the season, and it depends on the time of year. And so, for instance, because our team, for instance, does contract to direct hire, For instance, right around the holidays, we get a ton of temporary work. And so every industry will come to us with something, whether you're a law firm, whether you're a nonprofit or association or a big consulting firm. We really see that kind of across the board. For direct hire, again, it really depends. A lot of the work that we do, I would say, would be with organizations that are smaller to medium size. We don't work with a ton of larger scale organizations just because they have kind of their structured recruiting team internally. But we work with so many different types of organizations that it really depends. I mean, there are going to be months where every order we get is with a mission-focused nonprofit association, NGO, whatnot, and then there are going to be other months where every law firm is reaching out to us with a need. And so it really depends. I think. I mean, that was kind of.
No, I can piggyback a little bit. What we see just trends from an annual basis of looking at organizations whose fiscal years might end at the end of September versus at the end of December. There's a lot of companies that we're working with right now that they just ended, and so they have a brand new budget. So a lot of times they might be, at least in their HR and recruiting team, that's where they're really ramping up to find a resource internally to fill some of those positions. On the same regard, sometimes at the end of the year this time, companies have this last minute, budget that they maybe haven't filled yet, but they're, hey, let's fill this position real quick. So that's another, maybe a little bit of research to do to look at when companies just fiscal years end of when their hiring trends for them happen. But overall, I think on a, January through December cycle, we always see a lull in July, August, as it is in the DC market. Right after Labor Day, from kind of mid-September to now is when we were absolutely slammed and crazy busy. We'll have that last minute push right after Thanksgiving, and then come mid-December, everyone's checked out for the year.
The beginning of the year is when we see the biggest influx in high-level permanent positions, because companies want to get their main players in set in stone before the beginning or before the rest of the year takes on. And again, obviously, if they can hire one HR professional or one high-level recruiting professional within the organization, that's really going to cut down on their costs of having to get temps in throughout the year.
One other quick follow-up, and then everybody else in this talk. Give us a sense of the proportions of the roles that you try to fill. Again, my own experience is perhaps other groups, not yours, have simply administrative or entry-level roles. And I'm going to generalize here for our audience of experienced professionals, that's not necessarily what we're looking for. Is your mix 70-30, 80-20? What's your sense of the roles that you're asked to fill?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say about 60 to 70% of our roles are going to be more entry to mid-level, and about 30% more high-level positions.
And I would say that's probably true across all divisions within HireStrategy too, of just how we're marketing ourselves out to our clients.
And whether it's a contract team or a direct hire team, just because it's contract, that's not synonymous with entry level or mid level. For instance, I'm in the process of qualifying a very high level project manager position. So again, it's contract, but again, just making sure that that's not synonymous with entry to mid level necessarily.
Who else has questions? Stop me. Rick, you're up.
The last slide was about why work with you from a candidate's point of view, and I guess it's not clear to me. So after why work with you, how do we work with you? How does a candidate work?
So number one, to partner with us specifically, it does not cost you anything. There are some staffing firms that will charge you. I would encourage you not to work with those necessarily. But it's as simple as we'll give you, before everyone leaves, we'll hand out our cards, but you can also go to our website and just fill out an online profile. And there we have posted most all of our open positions that we're currently working on. So you'll fill out an online profile, and then a recruiter, depending on which sector that you're in, a recruiter would reach out to you and just kind of start that process. Typically we talk over the phone first for about 10 to 15 minutes, just assessing what you're looking for and really being transparent and honest about what we see, because we're only working on a small subset of all of the positions in DC. And then if it sounds like it's a good match, we invite you in to meet in person with a recruiter to really go through kind of that job searching diagnosis, right, of all of those factors that we talked about of what's most important to you, so that when we get in positions with our clients, we'd be able to reach out.
So it's real, what's in it for your company is to build your pool of available
Right.
candidates.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Katie says this all the time. We have never placed anyone we haven't met with. Again, there's so much more to you than what's on paper, so we really want to make sure that we have a good understanding of what's most important to you, so that when we do have a position, we're coming to you with, the company culture and the environment and how that's going to be relevant to what we discussed when you came in to meet with us.
Other questions? Yes.
So, if you have an opening and I'd be interested in, what's the timeline? From the time I see it, meet with you, to the placement?
So again, that really depends on your level of experience, what you're targeting, how particular you are. I mean, if we meet with somebody who says that, they can only work in a specific county and they need, a specific salary and they're only looking to work for a specific type of industry, that timeline obviously could be a lot longer than somebody who's extremely open-minded to a lot of different things. So again, there are a lot of factors involved in that, but I will say that I think 50 to 60% of everyone we meet with, we're at least able to get an interview for. Again, our job is to get you in front of that client and really set you up for success. You getting the job is essentially on you. We will do everything we can to help with that, but we can't guarantee a placement.
One thing to note, I will say, is partnering with us versus maybe partnering with the company directly. By the time a company comes to us with a need on the client side, that it's a pretty dire need. That's why they've asked for additional resources. So once you're in process with that client, I would say on average, I don't have these, I know we have these stats somewhere, we don't have it with us, probably within 2 weeks, especially on a permanent side, you're gonna get placed within that company. On a contract basis, it's within a couple of days because it's that quick.
I would say about
once we talk to you about something specifically.
Yeah, and I would say about 70 to 80% of the people that we get interviews for, we're able to place.
Sorry, I have another question.
Yeah, it's okay.
Do you, I've been with a lot of staffing and I've used them. Do you make them do all of the tasks? Is that standard?
No.
No, we don't. I know I talk with a lot of candidates who work with other staffing firms, and that's something that we don't ask you to do any of those testings unless our clients ask for that.
Yeah, if a client comes to us saying this is a prerequisite prior to being submitted for this opportunity, we need to see test scores for XYZ, then we'll be very upfront with you. And
Yeah, I'm not to say anything, but I found it a little insulting when they asked me to do grammar tests, but I have a master's in communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's exactly why we don't have candidates do that. We really want to hear what your experience is and your background and let that stand for unless the client wants additional.
Thank you.
Yeah.
we really try to advocate for our candidates in that regard in terms of, this is why we feel that they're the best fit for this position. And then again, if the client needs additional information, then.
Yeah.
My name is John. Thanks for coming out today. It's a really
Thanks for
nice
having us.
presentation. Obviously very well prepared. Gotten a lot out of it. As I mentioned earlier, my current title is VP Strategic Communications.
Okay.
That position is coming to an end at the end of this month.
Okay.
There are areas that you all specialize in. I'm not sure if it fits into one of your areas, and I'm guessing that different firms specialize in different areas, perhaps. But there's no harm in going through the process, right?
No, absolutely not. Especially because we work with so many clients that will come to us with these out-of-the-box positions because we've filled 10, 15, 20 roles with them, and they trust our process, they trust our candidates, they trust kind of our methodology, and so there's definitely no harm. We will never want to overpromise and say, oh my gosh, 100% I'm going to get you a job tomorrow. That said, if a position comes in down the pipeline in the next week or two or month, then at least we've met and had that conversation. You're the first person I'm going to reach out to about that. So yeah, there's definitely no harm in.
And when you say you normally don't do executive search, where's that line drawn? Is there a title of, obviously CEO would probably be outside the realm of what you normally do.
Yeah, I think the best way to answer that is maybe give a salary range of the types of positions. So I would say anything from like 40K to maybe 120, 130 max is kind of what we see, and that's kind of a very
That's your sweet spot.
yeah 100 to 120, 130. That's very I would say maybe like 5% of the time.
Yeah.
But
It's hard to say by title, just because
Yeah.
we partner with a lot of startups that, you know,
Everybody's
a
big.
2016 grad might be the COO,
Right.
and it throws off that average a little bit. But yeah, I would say between 40K and 120,
And that's-
130 is our.
Yeah, and that's specific to our team as well. And as I mentioned, I think the HR admin umbrella can be so vague sometimes because as an administrative assistant, you could be working with the marketing director and helping out with, you know, certain projects and initiatives and events. And although your title is administrative assistant, you're really doing a lot more than that. So it's difficult sometimes to put a specific.
I did contact HireStrategy,
Okay.
and I sent them my resume,
Okay.
but I didn't have a chance to really talk with them because I've registered with, I think 4 or 5
Okay.
other staffing, but I don't know that they would specifically have anything for me. So that's why I'm registered with all these agencies.
Yeah. And we always encourage our candidates to also utilize all of the resources out there. You know, we understand that we're not the end all be all. If we could place every candidate we met with, I mean, we'd be miracle workers and we'd be millionaires and probably not standing here right now. So, no, we absolutely encourage you to utilize all of your resources because, again, we only focus on a certain percentage within the DC market. So, if you submitted your application, we're definitely happy to
Let me
keep
see
that.
if you know that person's name.
Okay.
I do have that.
We can maybe talk about flying
Yeah,
afterwards.
afterwards. Next, yes?
Oh,
So-
that's right.
So I'm trying to leverage my, skills into a different industry
Mhm.
that's using my skills as
Mhm.
well. And I got a call from their recruiter, because it's a huge company, Friday. It was a bit of a cold call, so I wasn't fully prepared. But I think I did okay. And I've never worked with a recruiter before, and the recruiter said to me, I don't know you, so I don't know what to say to the senior recruiter, because all I'm doing is trying to get my application in front of the hiring manager, because I feel like I'm really fit for the position. So how do you, I was just interested in seeing your recruiters and them coming into this, because I've really not gone to a recruiting agency ever before to get a job, but because I'm transitioning, what is your kind of feedback on something like this? Do recruiters have to get to know you, or
Yeah, so that's a great point, and that's where I think staffing firms, and I can only speak for HireStrategy, that we really pride ourselves on being a full service staffing firm and really taking a consultative approach, that we are not just sending resumes, we're not just a resume review shop and serving as an ATS for our clients and just filtering through candidates that might apply and then sending them over. We really are screening and qualifying our candidates on behalf of our clients. And on the candidate side, it just helps you when I'm sending you over to a client or a position, it's one that you're going to be really excited about. That we're really walking through that, what your wants are in line with what the client needs. So I don't know if that would answer your question or not.
I understand. What I'm understanding is your strategy. You really try and get to know someone like me, but is that typically the process for recruiters?
Well,
So it's
are you talking about corporate recruiters or firms in general? Because obviously we can't speak on behalf of every corporate recruiter because, again, they've got a lot of other things they're doing internally.
Yeah.
So it depends on, there are probably various factors involved. So if you submitted your application to a corporate recruiter internally at an organization, you may not necessarily know if that position is their number one priority. And so their time to get back to you may shift. If it's a position that, they wanted somebody in yesterday, they may be a little bit more responsive. It really depends on the company and, internally kind of what's going on and how that impacts the recruiter's maybe sense of urgency to respond to candidates that are applying, and also how many candidates are applying. So if it's a very niche position, I think that, the turnaround may be a little bit faster sometimes versus if it's a position where 200 applicants are applying online, it could be difficult to get kind of quick turnaround, but that's, again, why when we partner with organizations, we're doing all of that vetting on the front end so that when we are presenting candidates to an opportunity, we're presenting our top 2 to 3 profiles. And we're really trying to specifically kind of connect the dots because, like she said, we're not a resume review shop. We're not here to throw resumes out of position hoping that something sticks. So in that regard, the turnaround when working through a firm, especially somebody like us, is going to be a lot of the times faster because we have that relationship. We've set the expectations as far as turnaround and feedback timeline and all of that.
What is the term of most of the positions that you place?
1 day to permanent. I mean, it could be a 1-day assignment. It could be a 4-month project. It could be, it really, anything and everything varies.
Follow-up question, if I could. You probably provide some insight into the Glassdoor, Google Jobs, Indeed. A lot of jobs out there. I know some of them are filled before they even posted, or some of them get literally hundreds of applicants. Just generally, what can you tell us about, I'm not sure how much of my time I should be spending. I'm spending more of my time on networking right now.
Yeah,
and that would be our
I would
biggest
recommend that.
Yeah.
Aside from actually going face-to-face like you're doing now and meeting people, my second biggest kind of job searching advice, and you can utilize this directly on LinkedIn, is picking networks of yours that are going to benefit, whether that might be former companies that you worked for, or maybe it's the university that you went to, or maybe it's a group like this that has some sort of online presence, and doing searches related to just one keyword, keep it really broad, and then that network. So for instance, putting communications in the keyword in LinkedIn, and then maybe the university that you went to, and put DC, and see who in there can I set up a coffee with, or just kind of utilize that to just expand your network even more so than just pressing apply on a website. It's really who you know. So
yeah, DC is all a matter of the hands you shake, the people you get in front of, and to piggyback off of what you just said, one of my favorite candidates that I worked with when he moved here first from New York, he was an HR director, very high level, and it was difficult, and he was struggling with kind of understanding where to start, because it can be very overwhelming when you first come to an area where you're new and you don't have any connections. And the one thing he did was, again, did a very similar search and just started messaging people at companies that he was maybe interested in, or people who were in positions similar to what he was targeting, and just saying, hey, can I take you to coffee for 10 minutes? I want to just pick your brain, see what your experience has been like working in this market. And one thing led to another, and somebody referred him to somebody else, and he ended up getting into a position. So again, networking and getting creative with how you're networking, I think, is extremely important. Don't be afraid to ask people random questions, even if you may send out 20 emails and only get 2 responses. Well, those 2 people are probably going to be flattered that you reached out to them, and would be more than willing to have a conversation.
Can we give you our resume today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And for a position or a place that you're applying that maybe you've done your research, you don't know anyone there, you haven't made any connections, and you just have to, at the end of the day, press apply. One thing to do, and that always stands out for me as a recruiter, is when someone applies to something and then sends me a separate, very just short and sweet professional LinkedIn message or an email that says, I saw this position posted, I just applied, I would love, really excited to hear your feedback. Just doing one extra, most people, I can tell you, are not doing that. They're just pressing apply.
Yeah.
They're going one step further in that regard. Yeah.
Next question?
I wonder about, there was a reference to it in the survey, but you didn't get into it, about mobility between the private and public sectors. Because I've been I describe myself or looking in the nonprofit and association sector. But I wonder how much, can you speak at all about mobility just because you've been a nonprofit? Does it exclude you from more commercial things?
And we specifically, for purpose, left that out because Emily and I do not do any work within the public sector, so we didn't want to talk about anything we had zero knowledge of. So I can actually send, and I can send it to Ken, our CEO was quoted in an article that I think it was in line with this survey with just that question, and so I can send it to you to send out to the network. At least for another resource.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no.
And then if I can just share, I've been in the association nonprofit world for 25 years. My perspective is that while so if you're looking to move into that world from, say, the private sector, that I think that you have a real advantage, because I think too often the folks within the nonprofit association world, get to be sort of groupthink. And there's, especially with trade associations, if we can talk offline about that, there's a real value, and there's in so many organizations a preference for someone coming from industry, or coming from that private sector, perhaps a little faster paced mentality, a little more bottom line orientation. I have some direct experience with that, and so I think there's a way to position that to work to your advantage.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think we had one in the back.
Yes. Actually, I had 2 questions, if I can be greedy. In the beginning, you mentioned something about the job rate, sort of like the amount of people that are looking for work in the DC area now.
Oh, the unemployment rate.
Okay, yes. We were speaking of that being low, but that having something to do with the competitiveness of the market. Would you be able to reiterate that again?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's less than 4% in DC last we checked in terms of the unemployment rate, which means that for every position that's posted, anyone who's currently pursuing an opportunity, I mean, there are a lot more positions than there are people that are currently on the market, and so especially when it comes to contract or contract to hire, it's been very difficult for us, for instance, over the last couple of months, to have more candidates for one specific contract opportunity, because the number is just, it's low. The amount of people that are currently unemployed is just very low. So if you are on the market, there are a lot of positions out there, and so clients, we've had to coach them on responsiveness, speed to market. If they're slow and they don't give feedback for a couple of days, they're missing out on that candidate. That candidate's got an offer somewhere else. I would say that for every candidate we're currently working with, they've got at least 4 to 5 interviews going off, if not several offers coming into them on a sometimes weekly basis. So really, again, just speed to market, and I think that has a lot to do with just the unemployment rate right now and just how competitive it really is.
And this is regarding professional positions.
Oh yeah. Contract to hire, direct hire.
Okay.
All sectors? Sorry, go.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I would say across the board.
Okay.
Yeah, again, DC has a little economic bubble over it, and I think that, there are always going to be positions out there, and there are always going to be companies that are looking to hire, which is great for us, because that means, we have a lot of business. That said, maybe 3-4 years ago, you could present 4 or 5 candidates to a position, and, the client could kind of take their time, and nowadays it's like, okay, here are our top 2 candidates, interview them tomorrow, or they're going to be off the market. And so again, it's across the board.
You probably already said, but what sectors do you normally place it?
So it really ranges, but I mean, nonprofits, associations, consulting firms, legal organizations, real estate, media, advertising, PR. I mean, it depends. Everything.
Anything in the DC market aside from the government, really anything public.
Yep, government contractors we support as well.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, let me still ask this question, which is sort of the elephant in the room, is how do you deal with someone who's, middle age, going in, working with like millennials, stuff like that? I mean, clearly a competitive market. People are forced to look outside the, general or traditional population. But can you talk to that? Does that make some of the, organizations feel uncomfortable when they're managing people who are older than them?
I mean, I wouldn't say that it makes anyone feel uncomfortable. I think that the biggest thing to focus on is how you're marketing yourself. And that's something that we really try to work with every candidate on an individual basis of, okay, yes, you may have 20, 30 years of experience. Let's focus on the last 5 to 7, because that's the most relevant. That's what you're going to bring to the table now. And so again, it's all a matter of how you're marketing yourself and how you're kind of spinning that conversation. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it depends on the environment too.
Even ways on a resume, we talk about this a lot of, we typically say, let's go back 5 to 7 years on your resume, maybe 8 to 10. If the job description says they need 15 years of experience, you better have 15 years of experience on your resume, right? Just like if you're applying to something that might say 2 to 5 years of experience and you have more than that, maybe make your resume only to showcase what you've done most recently, so that at least you're getting that first conversation, at least you're getting that phone call from the recruiter. That's kind of I think that's what the purpose of your resume is really just branding yourself to actually get that first phone call. And then once you're in front of that person, being able to explain what your skill set can bring to the role.
And to piggyback off of that, if it says 2 to 5 years in X, Y, Z, and you have experience outside of that in addition to the 2 to 5 years, we're going to really work with you to market the relevant experience. So focusing on this person brings X amount of experience, overall in this area. That said, here are the 2 to 5 years of experience specific to what you're looking for. So our job is to really kind of help really target you and how it relates to the position.
Great, thank you.
If I can ask a follow-up question related to that, I think technology often becomes a proxy. Let's be honest, a proxy for ageism, right? Someone will say, well, we don't know if you'd be the right fit for this because we're really looking for someone who's at the cutting edge of technology. With that in mind, do you have any suggestions for our group? And again, I'm going to generalize and say that we are 40 plus. And so are there things that we can, as a group, can or cannot, should not do to demonstrate that we are conversant in or at least open to technology? One speaker we had, just as an example, one speaker we had said, leave your BlackBerry at home, bring your iPhone. Don't put your BlackBerry on the table. But so are there simple or more nuanced things that you'd suggest?
Little things that it might sound simple, but I talk about this even with recent grads who are putting this on their resume of things within a position when you're highlighting, kind of bullet pointed out of what you've done. In one of those bullet points, not just at the end of your resume and listing out all the technologies that you've ever worked in, but really explaining, conducted financial analysis in Excel using X, Y, and Z. Right, making it a little bit more clear. In the same regard, making sure that same thing's on your LinkedIn profile. And then one other note, I guess, on your LinkedIn profile of, this is something that we do for even new recruiters, kind of on the other side of graduation years, of just take it off, really being specific about what positions you put on there in line with maybe what we talked about of what's on your resume, so that everything's kind of streamlined.
So perhaps name dropping or providing some direct references to technology platforms.
That you've actually worked in on a day-to-day, that I think maybe when you're making a resume, you're not thinking of it because you're like, this is what I worked in every day, but actually calling that out. So
explaining how you use the technology as opposed to just what technologies you've used.
Yep.
That's why every week, a couple times a week, I go for Microsoft Word Suites training with MLA Library. Also at the Arlington Employment Center, I was given a chance to take a 5-week course as an administrative assistant that included basic accounting, customer service, and Microsoft Suites.
There are so many resources out there.
So that was just recent, and I continue taking my Microsoft Word Suites training.
Oh, you had a second question in the back. We didn't get to yours. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just sort of wanted to maybe question in what I call job lotto, which is essentially where there's a job that's advertised, many times through an agency or not. It says go through these steps to apply. Go onto the website or submit your application or whatever. You put it in and then bupkis. Attempting to contact not only the organization, whether that be the agency, the person who is in charge of hiring for the position, to say, did it go through? What stage are you in hiring? Is there anything else you need from me? What is the competition level? If there are 1,000 of us, is there 5 of us? What's the follow-up? What's happening? I heard one agency one time say, we get way too many people to take this so seriously, so I answer the person that calls me 2 and 3 times. What is the key, if there is one? Essentially, if we're playing job lotto and we're hitting apply to these positions, are we expected to not hear back because we're not candidates or because the agent isn't on it, or what is going on, essentially, is what I like to know.
And I talk about this a lot with my candidates because there's so many things out of you or mine control when it comes to that process of sometimes a company comes to us with a need, and that need, we put it up on our website and it's filled within 24 hours because that's how quickly the client was ready to move, and we had sent candidates over that we met with the past week right? There are other factors where something happens and then budget cuts or the position is no longer available. Like there's all these things that are aside from just the firm's response time or your skill set, more importantly, that we just can't control.
And I will say that, I don't think it's okay that, maybe if you've reached out to somebody and you've sent a follow-up and you don't get a response back. I mean, my first recommendation is to not work with that firm. That said, I do recommend keeping the follow-up short and sweet and just saying, kind of what Katie said, hey, I applied to XYZ position, would love to discuss, my qualifications in regards to this role. When can we connect? We will always take 5 to 10 minutes to get on the phone with somebody. Even if we can't, we can't be a resource to every single candidate out there. That said, we will at least have a conversation with you and say, look, for these reasons, this falls outside of our wheelhouse or outside of the matrix of positions that we work on. That said, if I hear of anything going on in my network, I'm happy to pass your information along to them. But I think in that regard, it just comes down to transparency and just taking the time to talk to somebody for 5 minutes and managing the candidate's expectations because, again, you may not be the right fit for a position, but I think that everyone in this room deserves a courtesy of understanding maybe why. And we don't have all the answers, but we will definitely do our best to at least just give you some insight as to why you may not be the right fit for something or why maybe the response time was longer than normal.
And last follow-up, is there a time window for that? A month after the posting, 6 months after the posting?
We typically don't keep postings up for, if it's something that's filled, we try to take it down right away so that you're not applying to something that isn't currently an active position. But like she said, sometimes the turnaround is faster than kind of the operation side of things.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? John, again.
Last time.
I have other people ask questions, I'm going to go to John.
I won't raise my hand after this. But just following up on the digital divide question, I saw a story in the New York Times recently about how to use social media in your job search. And you hit on LinkedIn, and they also talked about Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And that can be one way before you even meet somebody. You sort of put yourself as a digitally competent person because you reached out via Twitter. But I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how to incorporate social media in a job search.
The extent, I'll say what we use on a social media standpoint, typically just from a professional overview, we're really only looking at your LinkedIn profile. The one caveat to that, and especially for you in strategic communications, that might be, when we're working with someone, we just worked on a content marketing position that a lot of these candidates needed a blog. They needed some sort of a portfolio. So that was an additional kind of, media outlet that we were screening. I would say we utilize Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to the extent of more just your professional presence online and making sure all of that checks out, but not necessarily for, reaching out for specific jobs.
Sometimes we'll utilize our Facebook and just saying, hey, who do you have in your network who'd be open to XYZ type of a position? So we utilize it in that regard.
How much is Facebook actually used in social media or used in connection with people looking for jobs?
We are not experts on that front.
I don't have a statistic, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can look into it.
Great. Other questions besides John? Well, great. That's terrific. Sorry, one more thing before we go. Just a little trivia. So, who has a birthday? Whose birthday is coming up? Whose birthday is closest to today? Looking forward. Really, when's your birthday?
Today.
Today?
Today!
I don't know. Let's see. But we have a little present for you. In case you want to use apps to help you in your search, because we know there's 1,000 apps for everything. So this is the big book of apps put together by a colleague of ours from the nonprofit and search world. And it tells you everything you need to know about using apps in addition to how it can help you in your search.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. So one more reminder, on your seats you have the brief evaluation form. Please give us your feedback. I think it's fair to say that our friends from HireStrategy are here today in part because folks in the room asked for hearing from recruiters and hiring managers. So we take the feedback very seriously, and you might win a gift card at the end of the month. So please join me in that we have a couple of little presents for our friends. from HireStrategy to thank them
love
for
talking
joining
about
us.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And again, please join me in thanking them. And once again, for those who are new,